Henry says it's only half the
I'm here with you again. No. It mustn't be you then. Don't tell me off not wearing a tie. I'm sorry. I thought this was in La Vie.
Very respectable. Those are the two in ties, my brothers.
I can't read I don't think you can be right. I'll tell you why.
Last time we met in
No, 1908.
Go ashore.
Was it 1908? Because I'll tell you what, he was dead, I think.
Why do the warnings need to be in a box? So, because if you didn't put the warnings in a box, you wouldn't know who the warnings are. Because somebody else sits there, not the warnings.
Where's the first two?
I presume the men on this side.
We're first here, are we? No. Why not? Why not? Now I'll show you the windows.
These two.
Right.
This is the stained glass.
All right, so let's start at the beginning.
That one.
This one here. This one here. No, we haven't got. No, that's a picture of Helen. Right. That's what it says. And this was about husband. That's the wings and wings. This is going to dedicate this window to Helen. That's what that's already.
Right. Okay. Wondering where you were. Like why your qualifications? Well, Kennedy. Oh, that's very near, very dangerous. Sort of place because being very cross in 3 minutes walking or something.
Yeah, it's 4 minutes into the thing. Not bad.
Hello, Mark.
Let's give me this job. Let's see.
David is in charge of the operation. That's what you call stood.
Girls open here now.
So you got what they call hayrish, freezer.
No, we'll move down a minute because we need everything.
Where are they? Oh, there's Beatrice, here she is. Yeah, where are they? No, where's Tamara Hedlund still coming in?
Yeah, I know. She also filmed it.
What a beautiful picture. Hello.
Hi, how are you, sir? Okay.
What a wonderful picture of Sefton.
Alice and Kaza and Cedric and Liz and Seal and myself. So thank you everyone for coming today. As we dedicate this window to the Ilui Nishmas Shini Morati Chaya Bat Moshe HaKohen to the memory of Helen Olivestone. There's a lot of people to welcome, a lot of people to thank. We have to welcome all those who came from Israel, in particular Cedric's 4 children who flew overnight to be here, Tamar, Tal, Arav, Yuval, and Shlomit. I want to welcome relatives and friends from Edgware and beyond. I want to make a special mention of Mrs. Judy Loppian here on my right. There are no words to express how much we miss the Diane today. Remember when we got together 3 or 4 years ago to dedicate these 2 windows to our father and our brother, Aleim HaSholem, the Diane spoke so eloquently because he knew the family so well. And our mother spent so much time in your house, Shabbos meals week after week after week. And we feel very much at the loss, as the whole Jewish world does, as we've seen in print and online all over the world. And we thank you for being here today. I hope that Isabel Herrera is here. I want to welcome her. She is our archivist. Hi, Isabel. She is the Olivestone, i.e. Olivestone family archivist. She's been working for several years on the genealogy of our family, and we've now discovered hundreds of people all over the world who are related to us, or some of them they want to be, some of them they don't. But we very much feel that Isabel is now part of the family, so it's good to have you here. I want to make a special mention of Mrs. Beatrice Ivanier and the son and daughter-in-law, Mr. and Mrs. Shimon Dankovitz, who are here, and you'll be hearing more about them a little later. Turning to the new window, I need to thank our good friend Sharon Gillimettle, who's responsible for doing the beautiful calligraphy. The artisan who put it all together, Mark Gerstein, we're going to have him fix it so that the lettering at the bottom is the same size as the lettering on the other side. You'll be able to see it. I want to thank the leadership of the Assurance Synagogue, amongst them Russell Grossman and Malcolm Greenbaum and Stephen Brown, who've really been a terrific help. Robin Deutsch and her colleagues on the Ladies Guild, and all the others who've been involved, and of course Gary, who, for those of you who know the reference, is the current Mr. Savage. We want to thank the shul for allowing us to pay tribute to our mother in this way. The pasuk which you see on the upper part of the window, Chochmot Nashim Banta Beita, is from Mishlei chapter 14. It means it is a woman's wisdom that builds her home. And that's the same pasuk which we put on her matzeva in Kibbutz Levi, where she's buried next to our father. I don't need to tell you, you all know what wisdom she possessed, what determination she showed in everything that she did, what a role model she was, not only for her children and her grandchildren and her over 30 great-grandchildren, but also for many others here in Edgware, and as we're constantly discovering, for many others way beyond Edgware. It's fitting that the tribute be here in the Beit Midrash, which in the shul which our father founded, and which the shul in the Beit Midrash, which the shul was gracious enough and generous enough to name after him when he passed away. This shul was so much part of our lives, so much part of her life. And almost to the end, she was involved in the Ladies Guild, which she founded. And our first speaker today is a colleague of hers on the Ladies Guild for many, many years. But not only a colleague, not only a co-worker, but also a real and true friend, Mrs. Brenda Churches.
This room so full, and I do hope you can hear me. My voice is not that strong, and I hope it lasts out. So good afternoon, everybody, especially to the Olivestone family, Reverend Judy Loppian, and members of the board of the Yeshua. The family have given me the honour of saying a few words on Helen's life here in Edgware. Following the foundation of the Yeshua Synagogue in 1946 by Bernard Olivestone, Helen's life and friendships revolved around the shul and the Ladies Guild, which she began as its first chairman, with some trepidation, so I understand. By the time I joined the Guild in 1964, together with several other young marrieds with small children, The Guild was a fully established, active group of women who, led by Helen, had an enormous influence on us youngsters, as we were then. And as our knowledge of orthodoxy and tradition was somewhat limited due to us being brought up in wartime, it's hard to believe that it's all those years ago. Helen's band of helpers are well worth a mention here. The Kitzbergs, the Millers, Browns and Weisvogels were all part of the fabric of our shul, and their friendship with the Olivestones was rock solid. Much of Helen's life here revolved around Bernard during his active years, with his devotion to the shul and the wider community. And then later on, during his years when his sight and health had let him down, and he needed a lot of support, Helen was his right hand. But we still had Helen around our table at Ladies' Guild meetings. One of my fondest memories was on the occasion of the consecration of the newly built shul. At a reception prior to the service, where anybody who was anybody in the Federation was present, and I was there in my capacity as chairman at the time, I found myself being introduced to several of these eminent gentlemen, but felt a restraining hand at my back. It was Helen, making sure I did not proffer my hand to anybody in the meeting. I didn't let her down. Her knowledge, advice, help and encouragement was a vital part of the Guild's continued development. Angela Peston, who has been here helping do the tea, but she's had to go. Angela and myself shared more than 30 years as individual chairman of the Guild, and we always knew Helen was behind us on all levels, but never backward, with sometimes necessary constructive criticism. Leaving Edgware was a very difficult time for Helen. Bernard had wanted to emigrate long before he passed away, but Helen was adamant that her life was here. And whilst her wonderful family dropped everything when they visited them in Israel and America for Yom Tovim, etc., on a day-to-day basis, in Helen's opinion, they could not expect this all the time. A wise woman. I suspect that this was a rare time that Bernard did not get his way. As a result, Helen and Bernard celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary at the Yeshurun. Diane Fisher, an old family friend, was invited to address the young couple on the Shabbat, and a Kiddush was held in their honour. In his address, the Diane pondered about 60 years being considered a diamond wedding anniversary. He could find no reference to this in biblical commentary, but suggested that, quote, Mrs. Olivestone was a diamond for putting up with Mr. Olivestone for those years. So Helen and Bernard stayed in Queen's Close, and it was not until her circumstances changed that she finally had to relent and go and live in Israel on the Kibbutz Levi. Anybody who visited her there would always be closely questioned about the shul and the guild back in Edgware. Being present at Levi for Helen's 100th birthday was an event I will never forget. I will conclude by repeating Cedric's quote, which I used in her obituary after she passed away at the great age of 105. You could take Helen out of Edgware, but you could never take Edgware out of Helen. Our Helen, wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, we honour today a remarkable woman. Thank you.
Brenda, thank you very, very much. I need hardly tell you the close relationships that our mother had with her, not only with her children, but with her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. We're going to hear from one of her grandchildren today. Just want to point out that we're fortunate enough to have in our family some Sfarim, some rabbinical works, which were authored by our ancestors a few generations back. We have copies of these books. In one of them, Ma'aseh Bereshit, by Zev Wolf Olivestone, his son, who writes the foreword, talks about something he learned from his mother about the family. And she said that up to that point, in the family there were 36 rabbis, dor achar dor, generations of rabbis, one after the other. And then she added that, but tuas bazeh, she is absolutely 100% sure, Torah chozeret al achsanya shelah, that the Torah will always find a home where it is welcome in this family. And it will never be absent from the hearts and minds and mouths of this family. Well, we may have missed a few generations of rabbis, but in this generation we again have a Rabbi Olivestone, Cedric's son, and on behalf of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, it's my privilege and honor to call on Harav Yuval Olivestone.
Good afternoon. Yesterday in Shul, we read Parashat Bamidbar. Bamidbar is basically a long list of families, ancestors, and descendants. It may even be boring for some of us to listen to this long list of names and families. But the truth is that even though it's only a list, it's a very important list. These are the ancestors who founded our people, our great community called Am Yisrael. It may be a coincidence this date is right after Parashat Bamidbar, but I strongly feel that the same connections that are in Parashat Bamidbar, the connections between generations, the connections that build families and build Am Yisrael, these connections are the real issue of this special afternoon. It was a great privilege being one of Savta's grandchildren. Savta's life gave us all a special perspective, a life full of inspiration. Savta lived through 2 world wars, through very difficult times, but her spirit was always positive and optimistic. She enjoyed living. She enjoyed seeing people and talking to people, having a stroll on the high street. She enjoyed cooking. She always knew exactly what she wanted, and she always was very straightforward, always said what she thought. Every time a grandchild came to her, her eyes lit up. We saw how she was happy. She had her sons and grandchildren and great-grandchildren coming in to see her frequently. No doubt she was happier in Israel than she would have been had she stayed in England. She had a son living right next door. Ellis looked after her, totally devoted and caring for her, coming in to see Savta many times every day and looking after all her needs. Many years ago, I remember, she used to come once or twice to us, to Israel, bringing sweets and chocolates, Mars bars, Milky Ways, chocolates we couldn't find in Israel those days. She always taught us that the small details and the way we looked counted just as much. When I began the army, and she was only 87, she wrote a few letters to me to cheer me up. I loved reading her letters, and this is one of the things she wrote with a special sense of humor. It's February 1997. My dear Yuval, just a few lines to say hello. I hope all is well and that you have now settled in. But what have they done to your hair? The pictures that is sent are good, but I hardly knew it was you. I hope they will let you grow all those curls back again, and soon. I remember visits to Savta's house here in Edgeware. I remember the feeling of the carpeted floors, the special furniture in the living room. Especially I remember the kitchen and the smell and taste of a special food. Potatoes and chicken, gewikeltes, knedlach. I enjoyed seeing her devotion to tefillah every Shabbat morning. She would never miss it. She always wanted to help and do good. I heard so many special things about the wonderful work for the Jewish community in England. Her hospitality to everybody. Even when she was 99, she wanted to help in a hotel in the kibbutz. She was very popular with the young people in Lavi. She was loved by everyone. Friends of mine told me how much they loved seeing Savta walk around the kibbutz with her 2 sticks, enjoying the fresh air and singing songs to herself. 4 years ago, my father and I went to Serbs in Poland, the town where Savta's father was born. The only thing left of the Jewish people in Serbs is a cemetery, which is now a wreck. It was very moving to be in the place where her family came from while she was still alive and with us. She was so happy we went to see her, where her grandfather was buried, but unfortunately we couldn't find his grave. On the Shabbat before Savta passed away, we read Parashat Chayei Sarah. In that parasha, both Sarah and Abraham pass away at a ripe old age. About Abraham it says, וימות אברהם בשיבה טובה זקן ושבע ויאסף אל עמיו. And Abraham died at a good old age, an old man and full of years. Good old age, full of years. You can't say that about many people. They lived to such an advanced age, with such a clear mind, such a great spirit. 105. We just thought it wouldn't ever end. Savta really passed away healthy. It is exceptional that she lived to such a great age, with a healthy body and a clear mind. The davening says, ומי שמייחדים בתי כנסיות לתפילה, וכל העוסקים בצורכי ציבור באמונה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ישלם שכרם. Those who dedicate synagogues for prayer, and all who are involved faithfully in the needs of the community, may the Holy One, blessed is He, give their reward. Savta was always there for everyone. She didn't have an easy life, but she never thought only about herself. So Chet Tzibur, the needs of the community, were one of the primary issues. Savta, together with Saba, founded this shul many years ago, and she is really and truly one of the people that dedicated synagogues for prayer. This window in the shul is really a never-ending promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishalem tzchara. The Holy One, blessed is He, will give her reward.
As you've heard and as you know, our mother spent her last years in Kibbutz Lavi. That meant that the burden of looking after her fell far more on our brother Ellis than anybody else. Ellis, as I said at our mother's Levaya, Cedric and I are convinced that your reward for the mitzvah of Kibbutz Av V'Em will be very great indeed. Ellis, please.
Distinguished guests, friends, family, all I want to do is read to you a few lines from a letter here. But I have to explain to you first of all the background to the letter. The letter was written on the 9th of July 2008. That was my mother's 100th birthday party, which we celebrated in Lavi. From whence begins my ditty. The background of the story is that in the first Pesach of the war, in 1940, my parents had a letter had a phone call from an organization saying there's two young German girls in an institution, and it's Pesach, and they're from girls, and they're drinking water, nothing else. Can you help? My parents immediately invited them to come to stay with us for the duration of Pesach, and that turned out to be for the duration of most of the war. I found that many, many years later that they came over to England in what was called the Kindertransport, where the British government graciously allowed 10,000 young Jewish children from Nazi-occupied Europe to come to England, and thereby saving their lives. And there was a special act of Parliament passed, and there is in the House of Commons building a plaque which commemorates the event. The two girls were called Beatrice and Celia. Celia, unfortunately, Alea Shalom, has passed on together with her husband. And Beatrice, she took her there like Chaim Arukim, was with us today. I was absolutely shocked when I saw it. I'm pleased, delighted, shocked that you made the effort to come. And thank you very, very much for coming. Also add that the mother died in the Holocaust. Your father, I remember coming to us in Edgeware at 58 Brookfields Avenue for supper one evening. And we've had, throughout the years we've been connected with the two girls, and at the moment you'll see. Now, the writer of the letter is Shimon Dankovich. Shimon is the daughter of the son of Celia, and these few lines which he wrote, I want to read to you. That is, I want to give this as a I think this is a fitting tribute from myself to my mother. This is what Shimon writes. My late mother, blessed memory, whose second yahrzeit fell today, never tired of speaking about you and all that you and your husband did for her and her sister when they came over as young refugees from Nazi Germany. Till her very last day, my mother would tell me of how you accepted them into your family and hearts at the time when you were struggling yourselves to make ends meet. And not only that, you collected money from your friends in order to help them to try and save my grandparents. Your selfless devotion made a deep impression on her, and she would always say that if she ever merited to accomplish anything in life, it was to a large extent thanks to Mrs. Olivestone. On a personal level too, I have fond recollections from my childhood years of trips to Mr. and Mrs. Olivestone's house in Edgware. The warm welcome and hospitality that always awaited us was something of an inspiration that I will never forget. And of course, we greatly appreciated the fact that you always took the time and trouble to travel and on us with your presence at our simchas. Yehי zichra baruch.
Here, there, and everywhere. That's the best description I can give to my brother Cedric. Cedric is the major mover and shaker in everything that happens, not only in his family, but in many, many other circles in the world. Cedric was the major contact with the manufacturer of the window, with the arrangements for the shawl, and with everything that happens in our family. So we can't ignore Cedric. We never want to ignore Cedric. We never let us ignore Cedric.
Thank you, David, for a very kind introduction. I appreciate it. We are all here today to commemorate and I even think to celebrate the life of Mrs. Olivestone, who was called the First Lady of the Assurance for a long time, of Helen, of Savta, of Grandma, and of Mum. And perhaps now, after more than 6 months, with the beginning of some kind of perspective, we are realizing how lucky we were to have this extraordinary woman, and she was an extraordinary woman, as you've heard already, our wonderful mother, with us for so long, until we, her 3 remaining sons, had ourselves reached quite respectable ages. Those of us who were fortunate enough to be at her small 105th birthday party in Kibbutz Lavi last August will never forget when she suddenly made an impromptu speech, wishing everybody there to reach her age and then to pray for more. Sadly for her and for us, there was only to be 3 more months before her life drew peacefully to a close. And what a life it was, spanning very nearly the whole of the 20th century and went into the 21st, through 2 horrific world wars, the London Blitz and the daily fear in the summer of 1940 of a Nazi invasion. She lived through economic depressions and recessions, the post-war years of austerity, and on a personal level, the terrible double tragedy at the beginning of 1995 of losing first her eldest son Monty and then her husband Bernard within 3 weeks of each other, and having to sit shiver under immense strain with us twice within a month, once here in Lavi, and then the second time in Kibbutz Lavi, once here in Edgware, and then the second time in Kibbutz Lavi when she'd already reached the age of 87. I personally thought then that she was so emotionally drained and physically exhausted that she could not and would not recover. But she did, and she bounced back then as she did time and time again during the last 18 years of her incredible life, when she lived first alone here in Edgware, in this wonderful Yeshurun community for 12 years, and then in Lavi after making Aliyah to Israel when she was nearly 99. She fell and broke both hips. The first one here at home in Queen's Close when she was only 91, and while on holiday in Israel the second hip broke when she was nearly 98. By the way, she was then hospitalized for some weeks in Poria Hospital, not far from the kibbutz. For those who are not familiar with Poria Hospital near Tiberias, I can tell you that you must know at least one of 3 languages, Ivrit, Russian or Arabic, in order to be understood by the staff. Mum's mother tongue when she was only a child in Antwerp was Yiddish, the only language she apparently knew when her family came to England in 1914, exactly 100 years ago. Later, of course, she spoke perfect English. You will understand that Yiddish and English are not exactly prime assets then in Korea, but somehow she not only survived, but also became a favourite of the staff. About 5 years ago, she suffered a heart attack and was quickly hospitalised again, returning to La Vie almost as good as new about 4 or 5 days later. She fell a few more times after that and once got up and said, "It's okay, don't worry, I've got nothing left to break anymore." As you will see in the short film we're going to try to show, upstairs in the hall in a few minutes, it was this sense of humour and feistiness that marked her life throughout. This film was adapted especially for her 100th birthday, but it was made mostly in our apartment before she moved to La Vie. And it was made for a series on Israeli television for Old Olim. As she said in the film, she always looked on the bright side of life. It was her optimism and an inherent cheerfulness, I'm sure, that kept her going in such good health for so long until her body finally caught up with her age. In her last years in La Vie, she immensely enjoyed visits from her grandchildren and from the great-grandchildren, whom she affectionately called the Greats. And even last October, a few days before she passed away, when she was already drifting in and out of consciousness, her face broke out in a huge smile, her eyes lit up when she recognised one of the Greats who came in to see Savta Helen. So many people have asked us since she passed away, "No," they say, "what's the secret? How did she manage to live so long?" Well, in the film she says it was her attitude to life. Accept what you get, she said. Just accept what you get and carry on. That's all there is to it. Actually, I'm not quite sure that's all there was to it. As you all well know today, in the modern world, as a recipe for good health and long life, recommendations are regular exercise, and of course no smoking, and above all, a healthy diet. From time to time, she used to treat us to a Polish culinary delicacy, quite tasty, something called Ungebrannte Suppe, which we always translate as a burnt potato soup. The grandchildren actually came over and they didn't like it too much. But don't get me wrong, as you've already said, Mum was a very good cook. It's just that apparently she did not like the colour green. None of us can remember, when we were young, ever seeing a green salad on the table at mealtime. In fact, I was already over 20 years old when someone asked me what salad dressing we used at home. And I hadn't got the foggiest idea what he was talking about. She loved making and eating chopped liver nearly every Shabbat. And her favourite food was gribbenes, which, to explain to those of you who are not familiar with this particular Jewish Eastern European delicacy, is the skin of the chicken fried in schmaltz. She never heard, I think, of low cholesterol or high cholesterol. And if she did, she obviously didn't think they were very important. She never heard of aerobics. She never did any physical exercise, except perhaps for decades, to push her trolley up and down Station Road in Edgware. And she also used to smoke, as did Dad, well into middle age. However, you will see in the film, I hope, how she bends down and touches her toes at the age of 99 after having just recovered from the second hip operation. But a Jewish mother remains a Jewish mother. On my travels around the world for Bank Leumi, I tried to call her often, particularly when she started living alone and when she was looked after so caringly by friends and relatives here in Edgware. The conversations were never that long and invariably started like this. "Hello, Mum, Cedric here, how are you?" "Mum, fine thanks, Cedric, where are you now?" "Cedric, I'm in Frankfurt, Mum, just about to fly to Moscow." "Mum, have you got your coat?" Or, "Hello, Mum, I'm calling from Los Angeles." "Mum, hello, Cedric, what time is it there?" "Cedric, just after midnight, Mum." "Mum, have you had your supper?" It's true. Our father, Bernard Olivestone, was, as many of you well know, and particularly those here today who lived in Edgware at the time, a very well-known and hard-working London Jewish communal worker. Dad also had a great sense of humour, but I'll never forget what he said when making a speech at our wedding back in 1966. "Cedric," he said, "has a sense of humour. but it needs developing. Not only did he and a few other ballet batim establish this shul, and a book could really be written about the trials and tribulations they went through to get this shul established, he was involved in many, many different Jewish organizations in London, such as the Shechita Board, the Federation, the United Synagogue, the Board of Deputies, the JNF, the JIA, or the JPA as it was called then, the Kosher School Meals on Wheels, the London Board of Jewish Religious Education, etc., etc. And he was also a founding governor of the JFS when it was reopened after the war, you will remember that, in Camden Town in 1958. He was therefore at committee meetings most weekday evenings, so it was left to Mum to bring up 4 boys, practically by herself, which she did with little complaint. Well, maybe some. But she still found time to establish and chair very successfully for many years, as we've just heard from Brenda, the Synagogue's Ladies Guild, and to be involved in various other charitable and voluntary activities. And in her 80s, she will be very proud of the fact that she went to visit the old people in Edgware General Hospital, as it was called then. I think it's now called Edgware Community Hospital. Yeah. Where many of the people she went to see were younger than she was. Edgware for her, as you heard, was the most important place, the centre of her life. And she said many times how much she wished she could return to her kehillah, her community. This was entirely understandable. She lived in Edgware for about 65 years. Our parents moved here to Broadfields Avenue in 1943, when, according to Dad, it was very difficult to get a minyan. This shul, this particular building we are now in, opened by Dad in 1951, and if you go outside you can see the commemoration stone outside there, and now named after him, was a central part of our childhood and remains constantly in our memories. I would like to pause here for a minute and, in addition to what David said, pay a tribute to a remarkable person, to Diane Lopian, the former rabbi of the shul. A wonderful man, a man of great learning with a sparkling personality and a twinkle in his eye, a great posek, which means an interpreter of the law, who sadly passed away just a few short months ago. On a personal level, we'll always feel eternally grateful to him and to Mrs. Lopian, to Judy. We're very pleased to see here with us today, as they showed tremendous hospitality to Mum when she lived alone in Edgware for so many years after our father died. She had an open invitation for Shabbat meals at their house, which luckily was literally around the corner, and she always spoke very fondly of them. In fact, we chose May 25th today for this ceremony, as when I spoke to the Dayan about it some months ago, he asked us to make the ceremony today, if we could, as he intended with Judy to travel to New York for Shavuot, which, as you know, we celebrate next week. The mark of many great men, I think, is surely their modesty. And when I called Mrs. Lopian to invite her here this afternoon, I said to her that after reading the Hespedim and the obituaries of the Dayan, I realized that I had had no idea what a great and important man he was. Judy's reply, you know what she said? I don't think he did either. Mum left Edgware and the Yeshurun, as she said, with a good name, and reputation for her was undoubtedly one of the most important things of all. She lived on in Israel for a further 8 years, in the course of which she received 2 birthday cards from Her Majesty, one on her 100th birthday and another one on her 105th birthday. And if she'd had a 106th birthday, she would have got another one. So we all have something we can all look forward to. Even in La Vie, we continued to learn from her, and she demonstrated to us all, family and friends, how to grow old, or in her case, very old, with tremendous and exemplary dignity, and to command respect from all who came into contact with her. Despite not having any real formal Jewish education, remember she was born in 1908, she nevertheless managed to instill into us children, from the time we were very young, a deep love of Yiddishkeit and all things Jewish. And she accepted the halakha as it was, without questioning, and carried out to the best of her ability. Simply, that was what you had to do, that's the way it was, and that was it. She is sorely missed by us all, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, family and friends, and I'm sure by the people of the Yeshurun she will never be forgotten. So for us, her descendants, the 3 magnificent windows behind me dedicated to Dad, to Mum and to Monty, echo and mirror their 3 tombstones far away in that sad small cemetery in Kibbutz Yamin, signifying the 2 things, a apart from family, of course, that were the most important to our parents in life, and surely in a way to Monty as well. They were firstly the State of Israel, and then this, the Assurance Synagogue in Edgware. For our family today, we have closed the circle. Thank you very much for attending. Yehi Zichra Baruch, may her memory be blessed. Yehi Zichram Baruch, may their memory be blessed. Thank you very much.
I want to echo something Cedric said. After my brothers and I all left the country, Mummy was left eventually on her own. And the people in the neighborhood were absolutely terrific, but I have to single out my cousins, Alan and Ruth Weisrose and Ross and Steve Robbins, who took her to the post office and took her to the supermarket and came and fixed things in her house and were absolutely so generous with their time and their encouragement that she really depended on them, and therefore we depended on them. I want to publicly thank all of them. And this is an easy segue into the next part of the program, because not only do we have an inbuilt rabbi in the family, we have an inbuilt chazan in the family. And I'd like to invite our cousin Steve Robbins to say the Kelman Rachamim.
שוכן במרומים אלו הסליחות חנום ורחום ערך אפיים ורב חסד המסק ברד פשע והקרבת ישע ומנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזרגיע מסירים את נשמת רב משה הכהן שלחה לעולמה הנבא לרחמים זוכרה לה לתום הכוזנותיה וצדקותיה בארצות החיים ונחלה שערי צדק ואורה שערי חמלה וחנינה בסדק נופל נסתירה לעולמים וצרוב ישרה חיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוע משלום על משכבה ונאמר Amen.
Steve, thank you. On Thursday morning, I came here to daven Shachris, and the Gabbai was generous enough to let me have the Amud from Yishtabach on. And the next day I was driving around Edgware and I happened to bump into Lawrence Corney, and he was walking along the Purcell's Avenue, and I gave him a ride. And he said to me, yesterday morning in Shul, I watched you standing. I'm standing right here. The Dima was in the middle. And he said, I noticed that one side of you, you had your father, the other side, your mother. And I said, Lawrence, you read my thoughts. It was so meaningful just standing here and in this shul and seeing these windows. So once again, we want to thank the shul for the opportunity of memorializing our parents and also our brother in this way. One thing, as Lawrence and I parted, we both said, no more windows. Everyone is invited to the left hall, which is through the shul. We want to thank the Ladies Guild for their cooperation and their generosity in arranging the tea. And once again, thank you all very, very much for being here today.
I really felt that this was the least I could do to come to take part.
We have history. We have history.
It's at home. My answer still goes on.
One of the sons, David, the younger son, is a very good friend of mine.
You don't choose, it comes your way and you make the best of a bad job. That's the way I see it. It's the only way. You don't accept it, life becomes a misery. Sure, I just can't see how. Or 24 hours a day, that's not me. If it's only folding serviettes for that, it will be nothing to do. I work very hard. Every school has a lady guild, you start a ladies guild. I've never been to a meeting in my life. I don't know what to do with the learners who go along and I help them. And I make...
Yeah. Who put the film together?
Making salmon cutlets, fried salmon cutlets. And when was I putting the ingredients in? But this is what it looks like. Would you like to taste of it?
Sorry. That is in your car.
That's okay.
Still here from Stuart House.
I haven't seen him for quite a while, actually. He's around somewhere.
We used to see each other sometimes. One pocket. We used to see each other.
Yeah. I've seen him there around. There.
I haven't seen him since I retired. 2.5 years ago.
He's around.
Sure he is.
Yeah.
About putting you on.
I'm here as well. Somewhere.
I just switch it off.
Have you? Okay, I'm ready. My sister Celia and myself came to England on the Kindertransport after Kristallnacht from Berlin, where we lived before. And we were sent to a converted convalescent home near Brighton, in Burgess Hill. It was called Weiberlin, by the people who ran that place were the Grand Order Sons of Jacob. And Mr. Olivestone was was on the committee there. Anyway, all was fine and everything until it came to Erev Pesach, because we came in December 38. Pesach, we were sent out to families in London, various families. So my sister and I came to a very, very nice lady in Gilder Crescent, which wasn't very far from where Olivestones lived. They lived in Ickburg Road at the time. And we got there the day before Erev Pesach, and it was a very nice, if I remember, blonde, bubbly young woman. And she told us to try to make us feel at home, and she told us she always benched left on Erev Shabbos, on Fridays, every time, not once that she missed out. Whenever her husband happens to come home from work, that's when she benched left. Like, say, in the winter, if he would come home at past 5, 6 o'clock, that's when she would. So my sister and me, we looked at each other. We can't stay here for Pesach. Not at all. So we phoned the secretary, who was Mr. Osterley. He'd given us his phone number in case of any trouble. So we phoned Mr. Osterley and told him we weren't staying, and told him why. He said, well, what can I do now? Tomorrow's Erev Pesach. So I said, well, if you don't do something, you said better send the undertaker, because you'll find 2 bodies here, because we won't eat a thing. So he phoned us the very next day. Yes, he'd found somebody. On Erev Pesach, he found Helen and Bernard Olivestone, who were prepared to take us in. They didn't know us from Adam. 2 big girls, after all, that can eat and everything. And what's more, they did not treat us like domestics or anything, but like honored guests. I'll never forget that. And they took us in. In fact, Helen had a little drapery shop in Old Hill Street, I think, if I remember rightly. She noch went in a couple of hours in the morning there on Erev Yontif. Anyhow, and that's how it all started. Then we kept in touch, and they very kindly invited us the following Pesach. And then we were worried about our Pesach, our parents apparently getting matzahs, and that I remember Mr. Olivestone packing a big cardboard box full of matzah meal and wine, and he himself sent it. Afterwards I heard they never received it, unfortunately.
Of course not, right.
But, and well, just to condense the story, we went to work then, we had bed-sitting rooms and that. And then the Olivestones informed us they were going to be evacuated to Bovington in Hertfordshire during the Blitz. Yeah, she had the last baby. Was it David or somebody?
David,
the youngest.
yes.
Yeah, in the Blitz. I still remember that. Anyway, they were going and they invited us. Would we also like to come along and get out of London? So we grabbed at the chance, and we stayed with them about 2 years while we worked there nearby. But we lodged with them.
Wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. I'll never forget that, and that was such a chesed. Because, like I said, we weren't even landslide or anything that they'd known us from before, or our families. They knew nothing about us. They just sort of almost adopted us. And after that, they came to my chasnas, to my sister's chasna, to all the simchas, bar mitzvahs and all that sort of thing.
You were both very important to the Olivestones.
Well,
the boys remembered you all
full
very
of
fondly.
gratitude. You can't repay what they've done for us. You cannot repay. I mean, it was home from home for us. Letter. When Cedric and Elizabeth got engaged, I still remember she wrote me a letter. I may even have that letter, but I don't know where. And she wrote in it, about the engagement. She said, Elizabeth is a very nice intellectual girl. I remember. And this is it. She was full of praise of you. In fact, I've heard from the Hirsch family afterwards that they knew the Wiles. And
of course, we knew them very well.
To David Hirsch, when he came this morning, he comes every morning to bring me the paper. And I told him after I'd been to the dedication about it. And of course, he remembered the Wiles from the others.
Of course.
Yeah.
And mention the spelling that you said about intellectual.
Yeah, well, this is what she said. She's a very intellectual girl. Like I-N-T-E-R, and then lectual. And somehow that part of it stuck in my mind. I don't remember what date it was, but I remember being at Olivestone's. So it must have been somewhere near perhaps a Yontif or something when it happened. And the gabber from the shul came. He wants to speak to Mr. Olivestone. So Mr. Olivestone went out of the room. And when he came back, he was white as a sheet, telling us that his aunt and uncle and their daughter, they'd waited, I think, 17 years or something for her. were all killed by a direct hit on a shelter in Dalston.
Vic doesn't even know.
After we stayed in the country, in Bovington, with Mr. and Mrs. Olivestone, I decided enough's enough. We met no young men or anybody Jewish there at all. We'll come to London. And we came to London, and she had a friend who worked for Weisrose, and Helen was a Weisrose. She got in touch with this girl. This girl found us somewhere to stay. That's it, room that, and we came to London. Now, what did I want to
You were
say?
talking about
yes.
Mr.
So I got
Olivestone.
myself a job at the Polish Jewish Relief Fund, I think it was called, and Federation of Jewish Relief Organizations in Soho Square. And one day, Mr. Olivestone Sr. also worked for them. He worked for them in the capacity of fundraiser, I think. So I got to know him very, very well. It was Mr. Olivestone's father, Oliver Sholem, a very, very nice gentleman.
My goodness.
Yeah. I think he originally lived in Wales or something, if
That's
I'm not
right,
mistaken.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.